is worth devoting some time to thinking about how presenting online is different. Now, a lot of Toastmasters clubs, maybe yours included, have sort of found their way online in terms of circumstances of the COVID pandemic, and that shut down. And if we want to meet at all, we got to meet online. So let's meet online. And folks carry on trying to run, really as much as possible, an ordinary Toastmasters meeting, but do it in the online format. And that's perfectly valid. But I also think that it's worth thinking through the distinctions between how you present online, how you can be effective online, versus how you do it when you're up on stage in person. And it is very different. And, I think we've seen that in the past couple of years. If you've watched the World Championship of Public Speaking, which I'm going to talk about more in a few minutes, but if you watch World Champion of Public Speaking, where they had a couple of years where the speeches were given entirely online, and then last year you had this interesting thing where you had a mix of people who were in person on stage and other folks and their remote technology. And an interesting thing is, a number of people said, gee, I thought the people who were remote would be at a disadvantage, but actually maybe they were at an advantage because they controlled the webcam. They controlled how their room was set up. They had control over some things that the people who were standing on stage didn't. So, definitely there were trade-offs. But before we get too much deeper into this, I actually wanted to ask you a couple of questions. And I'd like to get some responses just in the chat rather than using any fancy polling. But what do you find most challenging about online presentations? What are the things that are different? Is it, the distraction of dealing with the technology, dealing with screen sharing and having to say, can you hear me? Can you see my slides now? All those things where we're sort of fumbling through how to present in this format. Is it creating engagement with the audience? I mean, that's a little bit tougher. And humor in particular, knowing whether your jokes are landing is an interesting challenge. I know my home district, District 47, South Florida and Bahamas, decided not to do the humorous speaking competition this year, partly because of those logistical challenges. I think it was also partly, bandwidth of personnel, how much effort they wanted to put in this year. But, I thought that was a shame that we didn't do a humorous contest at the district level. But that lack of feedback can be interesting. Timing, a simple thing is keeping track of the timer's video to know where you are in the speech. And let's see, okay, and we have a number of responses here in the chat. Creating engagement with the audience. Several people agreed that was one of the most challenging things, or just futzing with PowerPoint. Fitting in body language. I mean, it becomes a different thing. My home club has what we call the body language monitor, whose job it is to watch, your body language up on stage. Are you looking excited? Are you using your hands appropriately? All that sort of thing. And when we started online presenters, we sort of kept that concept, but we transformed it into a role called the watcher. So the watcher is supposed to look at all the aspects of how you present yourself on screen. If you use a virtual background, if you're using slides, or using them effectively, or are they actually a distraction from what you're trying to convey, which they certainly can be. And partly to address those challenges, we came up with something we call our webinar contest. And I bring it up partly because you're invited to participate. We are doing an invitational event where all the contestants will be guest speakers coming to our club to compete. We're going to be doing that on June 12th. First, on June 8th, we're going to do one just for our club. So you're also welcome to come and check that out. There's I'm going to post a bunch of links of resources as part of this. But if you actually go to our website, optoastmasters.org/webinar, there's a blog post where I talk about the concept. But one of the ways that we sort of hacked the usual scoring criteria of the International Speech Contest is we have this big number of points that's awarded for audience engagement. So finding some way of engaging, whether it's through use of some polling technology or just the chat, or even asking people to unmute. But one of the things is sort of like how salespeople talk about how you have to ask for the sale. You have to deliberately at some point reach out and ask people to engage with you in order to make it happen in the online format. So that's a little bit different. We also have a bunch of points awarded for a call to action, because if you think of a commercial webinar, usually they're trying to get you to do something, sign up for something. So in the webinar contest, you're supposed to end with a clear call to action, and that's another portion of the points. And visual elements are also given a high ranking. So think about that, whether you'd like to compete or put on one of these contests for your own club. I'm hoping that it will kind of catch on. And these are just some techniques. Again, deliberately seek some engagement. Your close-up is a reference to, it's time for my close-up, Mr. DeMille. Put your face on screen. Don't just do slides. I think there is a tendency when we do presentations online to think that that means it's a PowerPoint presentation. But your face can be the most powerful special effect. Maybe not my face, but your face can be the most powerful special effect. If you have a good smile, or people can see how you're thinking through what you're presenting. I talk about focused razzle dazzle. So I don't want it to turn into just a special effects spectacular necessarily, but use visual effects. Think about how you use them to help with your message. And just variety, like shift my video from appearing on the left to on the right. And I can show you how I'm doing that in just a moment. Think of it in terms of scene changes. One of the experts we've had come give workshops at our club, Roger Corville, who coaches corporate types, who helps them organize webinars, coaches speakers on how to put on an online presentation. He talks about research coming out of movies and TV about how frequently something new needs to appear on the screen for people not to nod off and not be engaged. So think about those scene changes that you need to affect, and take risks. Well, I'm going to have I have a little guest speaker come in by video in a moment to talk a little bit more about that. Now, some of the technologies that are available that you can experiment with are OBS Studio, which is what I'm using right now, which is a free software project. So this, again, is for doing special effects. I'm not saying that every speech needs this kind of technology, but it's something that you should be aware is available. And there are some great tutorials available out on the web. An alternative to OBS that's Mac specific is called eCam. That's also very popular. And then Prezi is one that is cross-platform and allows you to do some of the same things, but in a different style. There are a bunch of these different software programs. And I'm going to give you just a little peek at how I work with OBS Studio. Let's see. It's not. There we go. So this allows me to set up a number of different scenes. So it's supposed to be my own little broadcast studio. And each scene can include video, images, other elements. And so, think of it as being sort of like a PowerPoint for video, for how to assemble these different components into what you want to present on screen. I'm just showing here that if I click on the image under my name. That's an individual component that I can edit. And let's see, another technique that I use a lot and recommend is to get your slides warmed up in the background. Have that screen sharing window already up in Zoom, if it's Zoom that you're using, and be ready to just click that button when you want to bring these slides on screen, and be ready to go back to just speaking to your audience directly when that's the more appropriate way of communicating. So again, bring in slides and visual elements when they're going to help accelerate or amplify your message. Don't let them take over the whole show necessarily, but try and do it smoothly, because and you know, I'm guilty of this too, but I hear a lot of presentations, even from people who are pretty experienced with this stuff, where they're saying, now where is my screen? Oh, I've lost track of that. So if you can try and practice so that you can get past some of that fumbling, that will help you. Now, let's see. I wanted to talk about some of the people who have made remarkable use of video to win the world competition for public speaking. So the top is 2020 world champion of public speaking, Mike Carr. Again, no relation, but he was one of the people who in that year had to pivot from probably intending and hoping to get a chance to be up on the big stage to, I'm going to do this all on video. But if you go back and watch his speech, he really takes advantage of the medium. And in the upper left corner there, you can see the opening shot of his speech is him in the corner of the screen, and he's supposed to be pulling back the gate of a jail cell. And the corner of the screen becomes that gate cell, that jail door. So he kind of makes it a character in his speech. And then down the bottom is Alexandre, who came in second in the World Championship of Public Speaking last year as a remote participant. And here he is trying to hand you a piece of his grandma's no-bake cake through the screen. So thinking about the framing can be as effective or maybe more effective than doing any particular dazzling special effect. So I do have something more to share with you, which is Mike Carr. This is actually an interview he did as preparation for the EVV CON event last year. I told you a little bit about the webinar contest that we're doing, which is sort of like the contest where you had your chance to excel, but the rules are tweaked a little bit to specifically look at, are you able to create engagement in an online speech? Which
I think is great.
Because you are speaking through this piece of glass, and there are all these barriers in place. But people do have license to use a green screen or to use fancy Prezi techniques. And I am trying to tell people too that it's not that you should do these things, it's just that you have permission to do them. We're not pretending that it's a speech that was meant to be given on stage and we just happen to be recording it. This is your speech that you designed to be wonderful and effective online. Do you have any advice for the people who will be competing in that about how they should craft it, how they should think through the process?
Yes. Take risks. If David Carr has told you you can do X, do 2X. anything that anywhere your imagination can go, try it, because I did not believe that I could win the World Championship of Public Speaking that year for a number of reasons. Other people in the contest where I fell in the contest. And so what I was just trying to do was to create a video that I could use for industry that said something, that really said something into the world. And that was it, because I knew that I was not going to win. And so I took risks. And it was that very thing that judges and everyone else came back and said, oh my goodness, that was the differentiator. And that's what happened. So, the individuals who are going to be in this contest, it's like a showcase. I'm sure that they can get a video, and it's a great part to get a beautiful, high quality video that they can take and they can present. They can either have as just something in their own personal archive that their grandkids say, oh, look at this neat piece of art that grandma or grandpa, put together way back when we didn't have the holograms, but they weren't able to, appear before us in person. Or even better, something that then can be taken to education or to nonprofits or to industry, and to really showcase what you can do in this medium. And there are tons of companies. I'm telling you, I run into them all the time that are continuing to say, if you can say something, entertain me, and make me laugh a little bit, then that's a valuable commodity in today's world, because we don't have to fly you out. We don't have to, and regional conferences are proliferating. So that's why I would say, take risks, try things, really work on that message, and it builds into the creative ecosystem that we all.
I don't know about that dial it up to 2x, 3x thing. I don't want the screen to be bleeding. I don't want anybody to be.
That's a great idea.
Special effect. Okay, so that's Mike Carr. Now, I've never seen him use any of these technical techniques that I was just talking about a moment ago. So I don't know if he knows how to use OBS Studio. I don't think he uses a lot of that stuff, but he reimagines how he is going to present based on the format, and it's taking advantage of its virtues and trying to work around its limitations. I'll show you one more thing. This is what happened when we actually had him as part of the EVV CON event.
Hello all. How is it all going? I hope you can see me, because I cannot see myself. I am going to come over and highlight and talk about a few things while I look very quickly to highlight the speaker. David, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me?
Well, we can hear you, yes.
Okay. So it's not highlighting the speaker. I will need to take a minute to see myself. Talk amongst yourselves very briefly. Hello all, and thank you for joining me here in my library. It is so great to be with you. I've really enjoyed talking with David, and of course I love this whole idea about virtual presentations. We're able to get with all of you wonderful people right here across the top. But let me ask you a question. What is it that we are really trying to do in virtual presentations? Well, I think that we are probably wanting to say something in an entertaining way while building rapport and a connection with our audience, aren't we? So that our audience remembers what we say, but also they stay engaged. And in that way, virtual is no different than anything else. And that's why I'd like to talk to you about this cowboy hat right here. This cowboy hat is my granddad's. He wore it from my earliest memory of him. He was in construction.
All right. We're gonna have to skip past that, and actually I'm gonna skip past that other one. But I just want to show you another example of a webinar contest speech where somebody did something interesting to bring in the audience was actually a Family Feud animation that came up on screen where she was doing her quiz of the audience. And if you picked one of the things that was on the scoreboard, it would go ding, 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 and roll over like in the old game show Family Feud. I am out of time unless you want to provide me a few moments for Q&A, but thank you very much, Eloise, for having me on.
I think we could take a few more minutes, and I wanted to see, was that all that you wanted to show us with the Family Feud special effects?
Yeah, well, let's see. There are a few other resources I wanted to mention, which, if you go to the Online Presenters website, there are a whole bunch of different workshop replays available. Also, the EVV CON website has the replays, including all the stuff of Mike Carr. And this woman, Cat Mulvihill, talks about seven tips for leading more engaging virtual presentations. And one of the things I wanted to show was that she said, start off with a quiz, which you saw me do today. A simple way of engaging people and getting them interested in your content. And so I wanted to show my friends webinar contest speech with the Family Feud animation as an example of how to do that imaginatively. I think she just found some little piece of PowerPoint art that would allow her to do that on screen. So not super fancy, and I'm sure she could do better today. That was actually from several years ago. But it's all about rethinking the possibilities when you're doing stuff online. And I'm going to post links including links to all this replay content into the chat. I will also mention that Mike Carr did eventually come on screen. But I think one of the things that's interesting there is you can see him, he's actually fumbling with the technology and exactly how to do things. And that part, as producers of the event, we probably could have helped him a little bit more by making sure we spotlighted his video when he was coming on. So there are a few things maybe we should have practiced a little bit more ahead of time to allow him to do that more smoothly, or maybe it's on him as a presenter that he should have reached out and made sure that we were going to do those things on his behalf. That's about that. And let me drop the links into the chat, and if there are a couple of minutes for questions, let me I'd be
Absolutely.
happy to.
Does anyone have any questions? Any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you for the awesome talk, David. It's a great pleasure to see you in person. I know we have been in touch like back then with the website. So great to see you in person. I have a question about the technology. I guess right now you're using this Frame. Is that one of the studio software you're using?
Right. So OBS Studio, I think it was originally developed for streamers.
Gotcha.
And so people doing YouTube Live or Facebook Live or Twitch, all of these kinds of things. But there is also a mode where you make it what's called your virtual camera.
Virtual.
And there are several other virtual camera softwares that you can use. But Cat Mulvihill, the woman whose video I didn't take time to show you, who talks about the value of things like polls. She actually has a ton of technology tutorials, including ones on using OBS Studio and using the Ecamm for Mac software. Marcus Salepa, who's known for his expertise on hybrid meeting setups. He also has a whole series. In fact, on the EVV CON site, one of the replays is of Marcus showing some basic OBS Studio techniques.
Glad
So I
to
also see a
thank you.
hand from Wada.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I guess my question was kind of the same like Rachel's. I wanted to know what are some resources for like backdrops? And also, is there any type of computer that's suitable for like more features? I'm in the market for a new laptop. And my second question was, what is your best advice when like technology fails? Like, what should you do in that moment?
Technology fails. I guess the base advice is to have a plan B, but also just to be adaptable. I mean, I think actually one of the main things that we learn in Toastmasters, one of the most valuable things we learn in Toastmasters, is how to cope when stuff does not go right. And you know, back when we were meeting in person, there were times when people were giving a speech or a presentation that was supposed to have a slideshow and the slide projector didn't work. You know, things like that happen all the time. I mean, there's definitely stuff that can happen in an online format where you're just dead in the water. If your internet connection fails, you know, and we even, you know, have some provision for that in the contest rules where if people are able to, you know, somehow get back online before the contest is over, we'll allow them to pick up from where they left off. You know, not ideal, but we try and cope with it as best we can. But so there are things that can just kill you. You know, aside from that, I guess is practice. So I did spend some time practicing with the OBS studio. I didn't spend enough time practicing to realize I wouldn't have time for all the video clips. So I should have, you know, one of my confessions for today is I should have practiced a little bit more. And you know, I guess part of the advice on taking risks is that this is also supposed to be your safe place to do it and fail. So that when you're trying to drum up interest in your small business and you use some of this technology, you've had experience with it, you're smoother with it, and also hopefully, if it fails catastrophically on you at exactly the wrong moment, which is when technology usually fails, that you'll have some resilience, be able to bounce back and continue on some other way. So that's not
Right.
perfect advice, but that's the only advice I have.
Thank you. And one more thing. Do you think like if you want to be your best at this, like would you eventually have to invest in a green screen or are the other like backdrops and features sufficient enough?
I think that so Zoom will do virtual background without a green screen, but you do tend to wind up with what I call the Force Ghost effect, where you're shimmering around the edges like Obi-Wan after he has passed into another world. And so I tend to think if it's important that maybe you want to get a green screen, you can get a green screen relatively ineffectively. I've gotten away from using it as much lately, and the OBS studio gives me another way of sort of having my face on screen and having some visuals in the background. I mean, there is also a Zoom feature where you can have PowerPoint as your virtual background. So that's another way of sort of putting yourself into the picture rather than having your face be just sort of off to the side. But that can be tricky too. That also requires practice. Sometimes your face can be covered up by the little film strip of other video participants' squares on the side. So you have to kind of think through the logistics of it and practice it and make some mistakes and hopefully come back better. But I should let you go on with your meeting.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Some of you will consider participating in the webinar contest or holding your own webinar contest. It's a lot of fun, and it gives people a chance to practice the skills that are specific to this format rather than pretending that nothing has changed.